And then it just kind of blew up because all of a sudden it's my fault. The room is messy and how completely unrealistic to expect it to be a certain level of clean. There was an element where it's like, okay, I can breathe. I can take a couple minutes. How can I bring playfulness into this?
You're listening to the Connected Parenting Minute with Will and CarrieAnn Standfest. This podcast is a conversation about parenting using connection first, trauma-informed principles. Because when you lead with connection, everyone feels seen, which is the foundation to a more peaceful home. This podcast reminds you that you don't have to be a perfect parent, but we can all get a little better, one connected parenting minute at a time.
Hello, and welcome back to the Connected Parenting Minute. My name is Will Standfest, and with me as always is the lovely CarrieAnn Standfest.
Hello, everyone.
We are so glad you took a few moments out of your day to join us, and today we are going to be talking about what on earth is happening when our kids lose it.
Yeah, that's a great topic. And it's actually really applicable to life right now.
Yeah. I mean, wait, you're saying that our kids lose it sometimes?
Yes, that would be accurate. That is what I'm saying.
Maybe multiple times a day? The same kid?
Quite possibly.
Quite possibly.
And other kids too. There's a lot of things happening in our lives right now.
There is. Well, before we jump into that, I do want to take a moment and say thank you to anybody who came out and heard us talk at the CAFO conference.
Yeah, that was really awesome. We got to talk to a lot of people and we got to present, and it was so much fun. A little nerve-wracking up until the moment of, talking in front of a live audience, just people there interacting with us, either laughing, not laughing. We tend to laugh at each other's jokes, but it's a whole new ball game when we're in front of a bunch of people that don't actually know us.
And it was crazy because we were expecting to get put in some classroom at the back end of the church. Instead, we were in like a huge cathedral, old school, like pews and like high ceilings. And it felt like it needed stained glass or something. It was crazy. It
was quite the experience. I may have had a minor freak out like slightly beforehand, but it worked out. It was really fun.
It was a great time. We got to speak on connecting with your teenagers. The talk was called From Eye Rolls to Real Conversations. And it went really well. It was well received. We had a handful of people come up afterwards and tell us they enjoyed it. And so I want to specifically thank you if you were one of the people that took a minute afterwards to tell us what you enjoyed or what you got out of the talk. That was really encouraging to us, and it helps us develop the talk better for future conferences.
For sure. We look forward to sharing again at the Replanted Conference here in October. And then we may have another conference coming down the line here in February. So we'll share more about that as that comes up.
We will. All right, let's jump back into it. So what is going on when our kids lose it, CarrieAnn?
Well, that would be point number one, Will, is that we need to understand the window of tolerance.
We need to understand the window of tolerance. What is the window of tolerance then?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that, Will. You actually explained it very, very well. You did a reel a few months back, I believe, and you actually demonstrated what the window of tolerance is. So why don't you explain it with your words rather than your actions?
No visuals this time. So the window of tolerance is a concept that Dan Siegel came up with in his book called The Developing Mind. And what it is it's basically what it sounds like is how large is the window of stuff you can tolerate before you lose it in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even just with that little bit of explanation, a lot of us can picture, okay, yeah, I know some people have a much bigger capacity for dealing with a lousy day than others do before they lose it. The visual I've used in the past is if you picture 2 glasses of water sitting on the counter.
Mm-hmm.
One glass starts out empty and the other glass, it starts out half full. You could picture this as 2 kids with different windows of tolerance. The visual then is you take a pitcher of water, and every time something bad happens in that kid's day, you pour a little more water in their glass. The kid who starts the day out with the empty glass has a bigger window of tolerance. He could have more and more stuff go wrong that day and not have that glass spill out all over the counter and make a mess. The kid who starts his day out with his glass half full, for whatever reason that is, there's a lot less stuff that he can handle in a day before he loses it. And it just kind of visually, if you can picture that idea that you could pour this, they could have the same bad day, Like those two kids could have the same day, and the kid with a bigger window of tolerance might make it through the day and not lose it. And the kid with a smaller window of tolerance might completely lose it halfway through the day.
Yeah, that's a really good illustration. I think you described that very well in picturing those things. One of the things that, you have to think about when we're talking about window of tolerance is that when we have kiddos that maybe were not born to us, that they may already start with a smaller window of tolerance. Because, those things can flex. You can be having a good week. You can be having a good day. You can be having a good month. And you have a really big window of tolerance, but maybe some hard stuff's happening in your life. Because you think about it in our lives, you have some harder things and, some extra stressors at work or at school. And then all of a sudden we have a smaller window of tolerance. So those things can fluctuate, and that's not unusual. That can be pretty common. But when we're talking about kiddos that come to us through adoption or who we're fostering or some kind of out of home placement, like through kinship, those kids can already come into our home with a smaller window of tolerance because there are already other things that are going on in their life.
Kind of the baseline stressors in their life are already way higher than any of them that we might experience in our life.
Exactly. And so that's one of the reasons why we talk about knowing what's going on with your kid, knowing where your kid is at, and being able to look at this aspect of the window of tolerance and go, well, what's going on in their life around them? Because, they might be coming home from school and like just blowing up at me, and I'm not exactly sure why. Well, what's happening in their life right now that maybe the window of tolerance is something to be considered. Like maybe they've just had it all day. They've been, this thing happened, this thing happened, this thing happened. And it is pretty common for kids when they come home to lose their stuff because it's a safer place.
Yeah.
And, and by the end of the day, who hasn't kind of, had it with everything that's going on? I know I get to the end of the day, I'm like, ooh, okay, I'm done. I need a break.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's the tricky irony of an adoption or foster care situation, that when your kid feels safe enough to lose it at you once in a while, that means you're actually making progress, that they feel safer with you.
Right. That's a whole nother layer of stuff. And I'm sure we will do a podcast at that point on that topic too.
Yeah.
So our first point is that we need to understand the window of tolerance. We're hitting the road this fall. Come out and say hello. We'll be leading a breakout session on connecting with your teens. First, join us at the Christian Alliance for Orphans, CAFO conference in Nashville, Tennessee, September 18th to 20th. Also, don't miss the Replanted Conference in Chicago, October 24th to 26th. Visit CAFO.org, that's CAFO.org, and replantedministry.org to learn more and register today. Want to book us for your next event? Email us using info@connectedparentingminute.com. We'd love to work with you.
And now back to the show.
And that kind of leads into our second point of we have to be a detective of our kids' big behaviors. The things that are happening in their life, they come home, they lose their stuff. Well, what's happening around those things? What is it that they're experiencing or that might be building in their life that maybe lessens that window of tolerance, or that is, that's causing that blow up or that frustration or that yelling at your sister or hitting your brother? I mean, hopefully by the time they're school age, they're not hitting, but you never know what happens.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the most common things, and I think this is a pretty typical situation with teenagers, is you got a kiddo who comes home and is either struggling at school or is constantly grumpy after they get home from school and stuff like that. And those two things could be tied together. Of they're struggling at school, and so they're stressed all day, and they come home and kind of let it out.
Mm-hmm.
Or we've even had kiddos in the past who've been struggling with sleep.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's an allergy or a food dye thing going on or whatever, and they're not sleeping at night. And
right.
Your older kiddos don't necessarily tell you how they're sleeping, right?
They may not want to tell you how they're sleeping, or maybe completely, they may not even realize something is wrong. They might be tired, but not even realize why.
Right.
Because that's a developmental thing. It's not until you get into maybe your 20s, even a little older, where you're like, wait a minute, I'm not sleeping really well and I'm grumpy during the day. I wonder if those two things like go together.
I'm not sure I've learned that in my 40s. So I'm hoping when I'm 50, I'll be like, no, I'm tired. I should go to bed at a normal person's time.
It does take a little bit to figure that piece out. And I agree. It's been a hot minute since I've been like, maybe I should go to bed earlier. I sit here as we talk about it and we're recording super late at night.
It's 10:45 right now, people. We're being honest with you.
Okay. So it's not super, super late, but considering the week we've had, it feels very late.
It's been a week.
All right. Be a detective of your big behaviors in your kiddos. Kind of ask yourself what's going on around those things and what can we learn from what's happening.
Right. Because understanding why their window of tolerance might be smaller is really kind of one of the first things you need to look at.
Yeah.
Right. Because my kid is losing it unusually quickly here, or seems to be really struggling at school, or really seems to be upset on the weekends, or maybe he's really upset Sunday night. Are they anxious about school Monday morning? Is it close to a birthday, or is it close to a time of the year? Again, kid's not born to us. This is a very complex thing to untangle.
Right.
Maybe fall was a really lousy time for them. Maybe they remembered doing certain things with their parents that they're not able to do now. And they may or may not be able to actually articulate those things to us.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I would even pause to say that it doesn't even have to be an out of home experience to be having bigger feelings during certain times of the year.
That's true.
I personally do not like fall. I've had such a hard time with fall most of my entire adult life. That's a lot of words. There has been a particular season of life where fall was not good for me. I was feeling very sick, whatever. And even till now, every time I get a cold snap, I'm like, oh, I got to think of something to look forward to in fall because I literally feel pukey.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because several years in a row, I was sick around fall time and was throwing up or felt like throwing up. And so my body remembers that. And so I have to give a little extra grace, try to find a little bit of things to look forward to. And I'm hoping maybe in the next 10 years or so, I can actually be like, oh, fall, this is fun, rather than dreading it.
Well, and it's funny you say that too, because there is a book called The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And that's one of the things that he talks about is that your body physiologically remembers these things.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we don't actively in the front of our brain say, oh, I remember doing this thing 20 years ago in the fall and it's upsetting to me.
Right.
Like there's a part of your body, especially if it's gone through traumatic or dramatic, difficult experiences, that your body will remember that, and either changes in the season or times of the year or things like that can remember it and bring physical reactions inside of your body. Like you're saying, like you would physically feel ill with the cold snaps because your body remembered being so ill associated with those cold snaps that eventually your body like physically was reacting to that.
Right. And I think that can all feel very overwhelming when we're talking about our kids, because there's just so many things that could be going on with them. And so I want to encourage our listeners, and I want to encourage myself right now, because I'm thinking of all the things that our kids could be going through. And there's a few of them in our house. And, sometimes it can get a little overwhelming thinking about all those things. But I think this brings us to point number 3, is that building connections expands our kids' windows of tolerance.
Building connections expands our kids' window of tolerance.
And I'll say that because like recently we've had a situation where we may be talking about some room cleaning in our home and kind of resetting expectations for that. And at first it was all fine and dandy. Okay, sure, I can do this. And then after a little while, it's not so fine and it starts into arguments, and then it starts into getting super rude. And then, I might be losing my temper a little bit. This kid might be losing their temper a little bit. And then all of a sudden it's a huge fight. And, that window of tolerance for that kid was pretty low to begin with. And then it just kind of blew up because all of a sudden it's my fault that the room is messy and how completely unrealistic and unreasonable of me to expect it to be a certain level of clean. And, it's your fault, your fault, your fault. But there was an element where I was like, okay, I can breathe. I can take a couple minutes. How can I bring playfulness into this? And so I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? And I just started going, okay, I'm going to stay in the conversation. I'm going to continue to engage. I'm going to regulate myself and keep going at this until we can have a reasonable conversation. And I might have been talking to a door for a little while at this point. And then, finally I was like, hey, I can't hear you. And so the door got opened. And then, it was my fault. Well, I don't even remember what. Well, it was my fault for some reason. And then I started going, well, this is what you sounded like. And just kind of totally was like, acted like a toddler. And, the reaction was like, and then I did it again. And then I did it again. And I'm like way over the top, like really very, very goofy and silly in this.
Not in like, I'm mocking you, but in like, I'm trying to be ridiculous.
Yeah. And so then what happened is I got a smile and I got a chuckle. And then all of a sudden, all of the argument and all the frustration started breaking down and we started to be able to actually talk about it. And so there was an element there that I was aiming for building connection, a common theme, something to laugh about, something to be a little goofy. And even though I was ready to like strangle somebody earlier in, 5 minutes ago, kept sticking with it. And then we were able to have this conversation and it's going to be a work in progress for a while.
Something that jumped out at me at what you just said there too, is that you also realize, it sounded like there was some self-reflection there of, I know I can turn this around.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't, because you were getting frustrated is what I heard you say. And yet there was also this, well, I could approach it differently. I could do this, whatever. Like it sounds like there was a little bit of kind of internal gauging inside of your mind of, I think I can regulate myself and turn this thing around. Because again, the right solution is not always just stay in the fight and keep at it.
Right. Well, yeah.
Right. But by knowing yourself and knowing him, you're able to say, no, I know how I can get him to giggle a little bit. And I know that I can personally, you weren't so frustrated that you was point of no return, because there's no harm in disengaging and coming back to that conversation. Yes. I want to give people permission to do that, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No, and that's for sure. That is for sure. And this is a practice thing because I'm practicing doing this. And so I know my limitations where I can go, nope, I'm going to step away because I'm going to do something I regret. That's the question I ask myself before I engage. Am I going to do something I'm going to regret?
Yeah, that's good.
Just trying to figure that out and trying to stay like, if I can reasonably and do something I don't regret, I will stay engaged so we can kind of figure it out stuff.
Which is really good for our kiddos too, to know that somebody's going to stick with them through the middle of a conflict situation, especially our kiddos that, may have some big reactions to conflict.
Yep.
So keep it playful is a good one.
Yeah.
What other ideas do we have for helping expand their window of tolerance through connection?
Well, I think it really is, you keep coming back to it. They know the safety of, well, we might disagree, we might argue, we might fight about this, but I'm still going to keep coming back. So if maybe you have a situation where you're like, no, I cannot engage in this conversation and not say something I will regret, then you disengage, you self-regulate, and then you come back. Because those steps over time is going to literally prove to your child that there's nothing they can do or say that is going to like make you not love them.
Right.
There's safety in that.
There is.
Because it's the point where when you go, nope, that's it. I've had it. I can't do this anymore. Where you're just pushing your kid away. And then you're like, well, I can't wait till you move out. I can't wait till I get you away from me. And that's what we talk about, keeping our hearts soft towards our kids. And that really comes down to us of being able to continually show up. But also, if you're struggling with that, there is help. There are people that you can talk to. There are resources that are available for you to be able to figure out your own stuff, because then you can love your kid well.
Yeah. And that's so, so important. And Lisa Qualls and
Melissa Corkum
are two ladies that we've met that have written a fantastic book about that called Reclaim Compassion. I'd encourage you to check it out if that's something that you're struggling with. There's a lot of very practical kind of step-by-step things to kind of walk you through exercises that kind of help you, like it says, reclaim compassion for your kiddos.
Right. So these are, that's getting super, super deep in the sense of, deep dive right down there, but really building connection can help your kids expand their window of tolerance over time. It's just that consistency over time, because as much as we wish there was a quick fix for all of these things, there's not. And that's why we keep talking about it. That's why we keep having these conversations on a podcast and teaching on it. And, because we're trying to help our listeners, learn the things that we have learned, give you a boost up from where we were at, but then also keep ourselves accountable for this stuff, because it is hard work and we're in the middle of it too.
Yeah.
And we want to continue to get better for ourselves, for our kids, for our grandchildren one day. This is important work, and being able to discuss it and process it and just share that with our listeners is really, I find it to be a blessing for me.
So very good. I love it. All right. I think that about covers our 3 points. Why don't we do a quick recap and we can get out of here?
Point number 1 is we need to understand the window of tolerance.
And just remember that visual of the 2 cups, one empty cup and one half full cup, and how they could have the same bad day and that kid with a half full cup is going to lose it. Recognizing that the bigger window of tolerance will help your kiddos handle more stuff throughout the day. Point number 2, be a detective about the big behaviors.
Our children will have reactions for a lot of different things, but knowing what's happening in their lives, in their worlds right now, will help us better understand if that window of tolerance is playing a big role in the behaviors that we're seeing in our kids.
Yeah, that's really good.
And point number 3 is build connection. Building connection expands our child's window of tolerance.
And all of that just comes back to things we say on the podcast. Make it playful, connect with your kiddo, find out what's going on, get to know them more deeply, and they will deeply appreciate it. And over the long haul, again, if you show up consistently again and again and again, you will build that connection with your kiddo. Thank you so much for tuning into our podcast. We appreciate each one of our listeners here. If you've gotten value from this episode, please share it with a friend. Tell them how great it is. And before we go, we want to remind you,
you don't have to be a perfect parent,
but we can all get a little bit better, one connected parenting minute at a time.
Thank you guys for listening to my mom and dad's podcast. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day.
For more parenting tips or to connect with us, check out the Connected Parenting Minute on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Or you can send us an email using connectedparentingminute@gmail.com.